She was given to a trader of the West, yet the Duke's love defied family and blood. Dry Creek, Montana Territory, 1874. The snow fell like ash that winter, gray, heavy, and silent. It clung to the chapel roof as if mourning what took place beneath it. Inside, the townsfolk sat stiff in the pews, hats in hands, lips pursed against what couldn't be spoken aloud. A wedding, they called it. But there was no music, no celebration, only the sound of boots on wooden floors and the weight of dread hanging in the rafters. Lady Evelyn Harwich stood at the altar, veiled in ivory lace stitched in London, wrists trembling where they met in front of her. Her face was stone, but her heart was noise, a river breaking its banks. Her father had once been English nobility, a baron who'd fled scandal with gold teeth and a silver tongue, only to squander both in the lawless West. Evelyn was his final coin to spend. Beside her stood Silas Gentry, tall as a pine, broad as a train car, and older than the war wounds carved across his chest. A Maine too southern to be trusted by the North, and too northern to be safe in the South. He was the kind of man who built his empire not from inheritance but from the ashes of others' lives. And now, he wanted a wife. He got one in exchange for 200 head of cattle, 2 engraved Remingtons, and a signature on a document that would free Evelyn's younger brother from a hanging cell in Kansas. The Harwich name, once carried in royal courts, now rode in the back of Gentry's black wagon. No vows were spoken. None needed. Outside, the bitter wind scraped across the chapel steps as the townsfolk spilled out in silence, glancing at each other as if wondering who'd be next to sell a daughter for peace. The only sound sharper than the wind was the cry of a horse, its hooves soaked in blood, steam rising off its flanks. The Duke of Lockridge arrived late. He dismounted without speaking, the snow hissing beneath his boots. His coat was torn, face unshaven, hands raw from riding without rest. No one had seen him in 6 years, not since he left for the northern wilds after his mother's death. They called him Duke out of habit, a remnant of the old world that no longer held weight in this new land. But he carried himself with that same impossible quiet, like a storm that waited for no man. The sheriff tipped his hat. "You missed it." The Duke's jaw clenched. "Did I?" He turned toward the wagon where Evelyn now sat, eyes vacant behind the veil. The Duke's gaze drifted past her to Silas, who was lifting a bottle to his lips, laughing with his men as if he'd just won a poker hand. Then the Duke spoke low, just loud enough to reach the sheriff's ear. "To bury whoever let this happen." But he didn't draw his gun. Not yet. He walked straight to Silas, eyes locked, boots echoing across the icy ground. Silas turned with a smirk. Well, well. If it ain't the lost Lockridge himself. Come to see what a real man looks like." The Duke didn't blink. "She was meant to marry me." Silas laughed, head thrown back, voice sharp and cold. "You should have come sooner." The Duke's reply was softer than wind. "You handed her to a wolf, and now you pray the wolf don't bite back." Something in Silas's smile twitched. His hand hovered an inch above the revolver at his hip, but the Duke was already gone, walking back through the snow like a man measuring land. That night, Evelyn lay on coarse linens in a bedroom too large for comfort. Silas had said little after the ceremony. A nod, a drink. Then he disappeared to the saloon with his men, leaving her alone in the cold house he called a home. Candles flickered in corners. The fire barely breathed. She sat upright on the edge of the bed, her wedding dress still clinging to her like a shroud. She had not cried. Not when her father told her she was to marry. Not when her brother begged her not to. Not even at the altar. But now, as the silence pressed against her like a grave, a single tear traced the edge of her cheek. She opened the drawer of the nightstand, expecting nothing. There, resting between 2 yellowed handkerchiefs, was a folded parchment. Her name was written on the outside in a hand she had not seen since girlhood. Her mother's. Hands shaking, Evelyn opened it. A crude map, lines drawn in faded ink, leading from Dry Creek's southern border to the edge of the old territory. At the bottom, a single word had been written, hollow, and beneath it, a signature that made her breath catch in her throat. Samuel. She stared at the name. Her mother had never spoken of a Samuel. The map bore markings she didn't recognize. But one thing she knew, the hand that drew it belonged to the woman who had once sung her to sleep with stories of green gardens and hidden valleys, of love that defied all things. Lockridge Hollow. She traced the lines with her finger. Outside, wind howled through the eaves. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote screamed into the night, high and broken. Evelyn rose. She tucked the map beneath her corset, changed into a wool cloak, and opened the creaking door. The night air bit like truth. She walked down the hallway, past portraits of dead men who'd never known mercy, past the grand staircase where the chandelier swung from the wind, and down into the darkness. The night was ink, the stars burning like judgment. Her boots made no sound on the frozen ground. Behind her, Silas's mansion glowed faintly, a wound of light in a world gone dim. She didn't look back. Not even once. The sun had barely risen when Evelyn crested the ridge and saw Lockridge Hollow for the first time. It was not a manor, not a sprawling estate of brick and window panes, like her father had once described with a sneer. It was quieter than memory, smaller than legend, a single cabin tucked beneath a grove of blackened pines, built over scorched earth that still held the smell of old fire. Smoke curled from the crooked chimney like a sigh too tired to reach the sky. Her horse whinnied at the scent of ash and snow. Evelyn dismounted slowly, her fingers numb from the cold, her breath a pale ghost against the blue morning. She stepped inside without knocking. The cabin was warm, but not welcoming. Shadows danced on log walls. Dust clung to every beam. And there, above the stone hearth, hung a portrait so unexpected it nearly made her knees buckle. Her mother, Margaret Lockridge, stood frozen in time, painted with gentle hands, hair loose over her shoulders, lips pressed to the forehead of a swaddled infant. But the baby wasn't Evelyn. She stared at it, dark-haired, darker-eyed. A boy. Behind her, boots crunched on the icy ground. She turned. He stood in the doorway like he'd always belonged there. No title, no gold trim. Just a man in a worn coat, leather gloves, and a rifle slung across his back. Mud caked his boots, and the wind had left red lashes across his cheeks. But his eyes, they were steady, familiar. "I waited for you," he said. She didn't answer. "What is this place?" she asked instead, voice barely more than a whisper. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. It was hers. Before your father buried her name in England. Before Silas bought what your father never loved. Evelyn swallowed the knot rising in her throat. "You knew her." "I was her son." Her heart stopped. "What?" "Elijah," he said, slowly removing his gloves. "Elijah Chaska. Margaret was my mother. She bore me to a man named Daniel, a frontiersman who carved these walls with his own hands." She stepped back, blinking. "But that can't be." "She gave me up to save her name. Your father took her to England when I was 4. Said no one must ever know she bore a child to a half-breed. Left me behind with a Bible and a scar to remember her by." He tilted his head, revealing a faint line across his neck. "I grew up a servant. Later, a soldier. Always with a name I couldn't speak and a past no one would claim." Evelyn turned to the fire, her skin prickling. "And me?" she asked, voice shaking. "What am I?" Elijah's boots scraped the floorboards as he stepped closer. "You're her daughter by the man who broke her spirit. I was her son by the men she loved. So no, you're not my sister." She looked up at him, stunned. "Then why didn't you let me marry you?" He knelt beside the fire, tossing in another log, the flames licking his face with soft orange light. "Because I saw your eyes the day you stepped from that chapel. You weren't marrying for love. You were sacrificing. Just like she did." He leaned back against the stone and exhaled. "I came here to burn it all. This cabin. The name. Everything tied to the Lockridge blood that cursed us both." Her throat tightened. "Why didn't you?" He looked at her, eyes filled not with anger, but grief. "Because the first thing I saw when I returned was you. And you looked like her. Not just in face, but in fire." The silence between them stretched, thick as winter fog. She moved toward a portrait, fingertips brushing the carved frame. Her mother smiled softly in the painting, as if holding secrets she'd taken to the grave. "Why is this still here?" Evelyn whispered. "I painted it. From memory. 10 years ago." She turned. "You loved her." He nodded once. "She used to sing to me in Lakota," he said. "She called me Wiaya, the one who disappears." And she was right. Evelyn felt something shatter inside her. A truth too long buried, rising like spring thaw through frost. "My father called her Margaret," she said softly. "He never said she had another son. He never even said she was from here." He hated this land. Hated what she was before he changed her. Evelyn sat beside him. They didn't speak for a while. The fire cracked gently, filling the hollow with warmth that didn't touch the pain in their chests. "I don't know who I am anymore," she whispered. He looked at her. "You're not his. Not fully. And you're not mine. But that doesn't matter." She frowned. "Then what does?" Elijah reached into his coat and pulled something out. A strip of cloth, singed at the edge. "This was all that was left when I returned here as a boy. They burned the place after she died. Said it was cursed. I rebuilt it, board by board." Evelyn took the cloth in trembling hands. Her mother's embroidery still barely showed. *E.L*. Elijah Lockridge, she breathed. "No," he said, shaking his head. "I never took the name. I was Elijah Chaska. Always will be." A long moment passed. "Why now?" she asked. "Why show me all this?" "Because you deserve to know what he took. And because you're the only reason I stayed." Her eyes found his, something fragile flickering between them. He stood, lifting the rifle again over his shoulder. "There's more. Under the floorboards. Her journals. Letters. Proof of what Silas and your father did. It's yours now." She rose slowly, the cloth still clutched in her hand. "You're not what I expected." He smiled faintly. "Neither are you." The ride back to Gentry's land was colder than she remembered. The wind felt like knives against her cheeks, and the sky had turned to steel. She entered the house without ceremony. No one noticed. The halls were empty, the lamps flickering low. Silas sat in his study, drunk and slouched, a half-empty bottle hanging from one hand. She paused at the door. He looked up with red-rimmed eyes and a sneer. "Well, the runaway bride returns." Evelyn stepped inside, calm as a frozen lake. Wasn't running, just riding. He lifted a paper off the desk and waved it with 2 fingers. "Guess who wrote again? Your dear brother's warden. Said they'll delay the rope. But they want a reason. They want a signature." She stepped closer. "What do you want?" He grinned. "You want your brother free." She said nothing. "Give me an air." The paper dropped onto the floor between them. Evelyn stared at it, then back at the man she had once been sold to. And her silence, this time, was not fear. It was the quiet before a storm. The wind howled against the windows like a hungry thing. Evelyn lay stiff in the dark, her hand curled around the smooth handle of the derringer beneath her pillow. The bed was wide, but it may as well have been a cliff's edge. Silas's breath rumbled beside her, slow, thick with drink, a sound that filled the room like a threat. Every creak in the floorboards made her heart race. Every whistle of wind, every groan of timber. The house had secrets, and so did the man in it. She hadn't spoken more than 10 words to Silas in 2 days. He didn't ask where she went, didn't care what she did. His attention was fixed elsewhere, on maps, deeds, bribes. A parcel here, a waterway there. Settlers disappearing without trace. Men in dark coats slipping money to land agents at the saloon. Dry Creek was becoming his empire, carved in silence and paid for with fear. He'd built his kingdom, and now she was the queen locked in the tallest room. But Evelyn had begun slipping out after dusk. She rode to the canyon, where the rocks rose like cathedral walls and the wind carried voices from another life. It was where her mother once rode with Daniel Chaska, where laughter echoed before it was smothered. And now, where Elijah waited. They spoke in hushed tones, horses grazing nearby. Between them sat her mother's journal, unearthed from beneath a pine whose bark bore the carving M+E. Elijah turned a page and read aloud in a voice like cracked stone. "I fear what I carried in me was not noble blood, but fire. If he ever finds out, he will kill the child. I've hidden the truth beneath Lockridge Hollow, and may the Duke never uncover it." Evelyn stared at the page, her breath catching. "She didn't mean you, did she?" she whispered. Elijah closed the journal gently, his eyes never leaving hers. "No." "Then who?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he rose and walked to the edge of the bluff, staring down at the hollow below, where the cabin sat alone in the trees. Smoke no longer rose from its chimney. "I dug under the floor," he said. "Found bones." Her stomach dropped. "A child." He shook his head. "A mun, buried with a ring that bore the crest of House Lockridge." She stepped closer. "My grandfather." "No. Older than that. I think he was the man who once claimed to be Duke. But he never was. Your father, he forged that name. Took the title from a dead man. Made it real by marrying your mother. Evelyn felt the world tilt beneath her. And Silas. Elijah turned, his jaw set like stone. He knew. Your father told him. Made a deal with him before he died. Said if Silas married you, the land would legally transfer. You were the key. She stepped back. He used me. You were married by law, Elijah said, stepping forward, voice low. But blood still has the final word. The stars above blinked in silence, cold and cruel. Evelyn didn't cry. She felt something deeper, a burning, slow and quiet, curling through her ribs like smoke rising from coals. Her mother had died keeping this secret. Elijah had lived in the shadow of it. And she had been made the pawn. She rode home before dawn, the canyon winds biting at her cheeks like punishment. Silas wasn't in bed when she returned. She found him downstairs, papers spread across the table. His shirt hung open, bottle half empty. When he saw her, he grinned. You've been writing late, he slurred. Trying to find your dead mother's ghost. She said nothing. He pointed at a sheet with a trembling hand. These settlers, they're signing over land like frightened children. They just need pressure. You understand pressure, don't you? She stared at him, hating him with a clarity that felt like truth. I know why you married me, she said, voice flat. Silas blinked. Do you? Not for love. Not for legacy. For claim. His smile didn't fade. It sharpened. And what of it? You needed me to legitimize the theft. You needed a heritage to sign it all away. He raised his glass in mock salute. Smart girl. You knew my father was a fraud. We're all frauds, sweetheart. Some of us just get better rewards. She left without another word. That night, she didn't sleep. The derringer stayed beneath her pillow, but her mind stayed somewhere deeper, beneath floorboards, behind lies, buried with bones that told a different history. The next day, she sent word to Elijah, but he didn't answer. Not with letters. Not with silence. With riders. She heard the hooves before she saw them. Sheriff Clayton rode at the front, 6 men behind him, faces hard, rifles ready. They didn't come with ceremony. They came with purpose. Up the path, past the fence, to the porch of Lockridge Hollow. Evelyn watched from the rise, her horse hidden behind a ridge of pines. Her breath caught as she saw Elijah step from the cabin, unarmed, coat open in the wind. The sheriff called something she couldn't hear. Elijah raised both hands, and then he stepped forward. Evelyn's heart hammered. They had a paper. A warrant. Treason. Not theft. Not murder. Not fraud. Treason. She turned her horse and rode hard, toward the one man who could stop what was coming. Silas. She would not beg him. She would break him. Because if Elijah fell, the truth died with him, and the blood that still remembered Margaret Lockridge would be silenced forever.